Welcome everyone. We're delighted to have you. We're going to be hearing tonight from Brandon Dennison from Coalfield Development. And just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. We'll have questions and answers at the end of the presentation. So if you would please put your Q&A in the chat. I'm sorry, in the Q&A box, not in the chat. If you want to put comments, other things in the chat, that's fine. But put your questions in the Q&A so that'll be easy for us to find. I think you'll have plenty of questions for Brandon. So we're very excited to have. Many of you all know that Elders Climate Action is a part of USCAN, the U.S. Climate Action Network. And USCAN has as a key part of their work the Vision for Equitable Climate Action. And the Vision for Equitable Climate Action gives us a framework for where we need to go to get the kind of results that we want on climate and on the world that we want. And one thing that's really key to the Vision for Equitable Climate Action, and that goes through everything else, is the need for a just transition, that we can't leave anyone behind. And particularly, we can't leave behind the people who have spent their lives supplying us with energy, doing difficult and dangerous work to keep our economy going. And we really need to make sure that the people who have done that work as coal miners, as other people in coal communities, as power plant workers, are a part of this transition in a really positive way and move forward with all of us that are not left behind. Now that's much easier said than done. And I'm a native of West Virginia. I was born and bred in West Virginia. And I know how much of a coal state we've been and how difficult that transition will be there and in many other places. And looking for people who are doing great work in making that transition the best it can possibly be, I found Coalfield Development. And Coalfield Development was started by our speaker tonight, Brandon Dennison. Brandon was born and raised in West Virginia, has a bachelor's degree from Shepherd University in West Virginia and a degree in public affairs from Indiana University. In 2010, he founded Coalfield Development Corporation. It's a community-based nonprofit organization that was designed to rebuild the Appalachian economy from the ground up. So one thing that's very obvious to anyone who spent much time in West Virginia is that a diverse economy is not something that we have. The state has been very coal dependent and doesn't have a lot of other things to easily move into, which is essential for the kind of transition that we seek. So Coalfield Development offers on-the-job training, education, and mentoring to people in the coal fields, and really makes many of these changes possible. They've developed more than 300 new jobs, over 50 new businesses, and more than 1,300 professional certification opportunities for unemployed people, including people of color, people in recovery from substance abuse, and former coal miners. So Brandon can tell you about that much better than I can. So let's turn it all over to him.
Well, thank you so much. And thanks for the chance to be a part of this really interesting group. I'm excited to share about our work tonight, and I hope that we can stay in touch. I'm going to screen share some slides here in a little bit, but I did think it would make sense. I'm going to talk about the organization that I started, that I work with now, but I also just wanted to share sort of my personal journey in this work. Last year was our 10-year anniversary. We're 11 years in, and so I've been doing a lot of reflecting about sort of where we've been, where we're going. Being born and raised here, I always knew I wanted to go away for a little while, learn some new skills. And I always had a desire to end up back here, and I wanted to help out somehow or other. And it was a vague idea. I just knew that I wanted to be of help. I saw a lot of pain and hurt and need for healing around me. in my childhood. I had a very happy childhood, actually, but I could feel a lot of pain and suffering around me. And in college, I was a youth director at a Presbyterian church, and we would do service trips, mission trips to different places. We worked with migrant workers at apple orchards. We learned about the situation on native reservations, spent time in more urban homeless shelter type settings. And everywhere I went, I was really very inspired by the people I met. But I also had this nagging sense that where I really belonged was back home, because that was the place that I understood the most. And that was the place where I was from. And that was the place where I could have the biggest impact. And the very last mission trip that I led as a youth director was to Mingo County, West Virginia, which is actually south of where I grew up, very, very deep into the coal fields. At one point, they called it the $1 billion coal field. And we were doing traditional home repair for an elderly woman. And as we were doing our work, these two young men approached us and they asked if we had work available. And I explained that we were volunteers and that it wasn't a paid job. And the two guys went on their way. And it was this very minor interaction, but it really stayed with me. And I say sometimes it started to haunt me, because I felt like it summed up the problem in Southern West Virginia, which is that we have people who want to work and who want to learn and who want to be a part of something. But everything's just gotten so messed up that there's nowhere for that gumption to be applied. And this worried me and it started to anger me, and it really planted a seed of conviction, and I wanted to do something about it. And when I was in graduate school, I was studying nonprofit management. I figured, well, if I want to help, I'll start a nonprofit. And while I was studying that in the public affairs side, the business school, which is just across the way, put up flyers for a new program called social entrepreneurship. And that was a phrase that I never heard before. And it really caught my attention as something that could be new and different. I knew that in West Virginia, there have been so many governmental efforts, so many nonprofit efforts. And it just didn't seem like anything. It all helped. It was all good, but nothing really seemed to change the game and change the trajectory of opportunity for people, which is what was needed. And so I thought maybe social entrepreneurship was something that could be new and different. So with that, I'll talk today a little bit about my journey as a social entrepreneur here in Appalachia. I like this picture because Coalfield Development, it's all about rebuilding the Appalachian economy from the ground up. And so, this is me in our main factory building where we launch a lot of our social enterprises. And it's just been a very, very humbling experience. And we really could not have started more grassroots. And if you want to learn more about us, coalfield-development.org is the place to go. So in case you haven't heard it, social entrepreneurship is a business model that really takes the compassion of the nonprofit sector and it takes the efficiencies of the for-profit sector and it really blends those two things together. So, the beauty of that is we don't have to be 100% grant dependent, but also we don't have to be so focused on profit that we lose our purpose and our mission. I'm doing this in Southern West Virginia. That's where the name comes from. We're known as the coal fields. And although we're based in Southern West Virginia, other groups around the region are starting to replicate our model. I'm going to talk soon about our 33, 6, and 3 model. And that's a workforce development model that seems to be really taking hold and catching on. But our roots are in Southern West Virginia. And we have a lot of issues. I try not to dwell on the issues for too very long, but so much of it does circle back to coal. In many ways, we've had a mono economy, and it's just not healthy to have a mono economy. We have an extraction economy where the resources, we should be, in many regards, we should be one of the richest states in the union, but the wealth was extracted and the money was made elsewhere. And so this has a lot in common with other mineral rich areas around the world, whether it's South America or Africa or parts of rural Europe, there's a resource curse where the areas that have the resources tend to suffer pretty greatly. And we follow that pattern. So many of our issues circle back to this over-reliant, this addiction, really. It's an addiction to the coal industry. And just being told for so long that you're coal country and coal keeps the lights on. And without coal, if we're not coal country, then what are we? And nobody's really been able to answer that question well enough. And that's why you see us sort of hanging on to the coal industry, because our leaders just have not done a good enough job showing what another way could look like. And so Coalfield Development exists to try and do just that, and to do that very tangibly. What you see in the bottom left there is a mountaintop removal site. Mountaintop removal is just an extremely violent form of coal mining that's taken hold since the early 2000s, maybe even the mid 90s, where the top of a mountain is literally exploded. And then so that the coal can just be easily gotten with heavy equipment. And it's actually less jobs because it's very mechanical in nature, and it's very destructive for the environment. More than 1,000 miles of stream bed have been permanently covered and destroyed through the mountaintop removal process. And we've been struggling in recent years with this opioid. It's an epidemic. Medical professionals call it an epidemic. We were living in an epidemic before the pandemic that connected to this substance abuse disorder. Just an absolute crisis. There's not a single family that you can find that hasn't been touched in some way by this crisis. And it links directly to the economic hopelessness that so many folks feel, the sense that things have just always been hard, they're hard now, and just not seeing a light at the end of the tunnel that it's ever going to get better. So that's the environment we're trying to find our way through. And so, like I said, with the two young men in Williamson, it just, things aren't working right. And even if I'm not an economist or I'm not a researcher or an expert, you just can tell as a part of the community that things aren't working how they're supposed to. You could look to the private sector, but we have there what we call market failures. The private market just has not functioned how it's supposed to. There have been way too many externalities. But government programs haven't really worked the way that they've needed to as well. So purely governmental approach is not going to be enough either. But also a purely charitable approach is just going to be completely insufficient to be able to address what we need. So we need innovative, creative models that take from different sectors of the economy and put it together in interesting and effective ways. So we started with our little social enterprise, very, very humble. Started with a crew of 3. And our first social enterprise was deconstruction. So we've seen a lot of out-migration that's left a lot of empty buildings. Typically, the local municipality tries to get a grant. They tear down the empty buildings and it all ends up in a landfill. And our idea was, we knew there were valuable materials in these buildings. So we decided to take it apart piece by piece and reuse and resell and recycle the materials. And that still continues today. This is our first ever crew. We started in 2010, but this is 2012 because it took us so long to raise money to be able to do anything of significance. We weren't able to hire our first crew and do anything really special until 2012. Of the first 3, 2 of them made it to graduation. So all of our trainees, and I'm going to get into this in a little bit, but all of our trainees become community college students. They're almost always the first in their family, not just to graduate college, but to even try to attend college. And what's interesting, the 2 young men in Williamson they had tool belts slung over their shoulders when they asked us for work. I never found them again, but I never stopped thinking about them. And I just think it's so beautiful that of our first 3, 2 of them made it. 2 other young men who were unemployed from the coal fields. One came out of the foster system. One came straight out of the coal sector, had been laid off from the coal industry and was literally couch surfing, dealing with literal homelessness. And they became the first college graduates in their family. What I love about this picture is that their kids are there too. So in West Virginia, and in Appalachia, and in many extraction resource-based economies, we're dealing with generational poverty. So you have generational poverty, and then you have circumstantial poverty. Circumstantial poverty being you've had a good job, you've been able to pay your bills, but you lost your job, you're down on your luck and you're trying to get back in the workforce. It's a short-term problem. It's a very serious problem, but it's more manageable than generational poverty, where maybe for multiple generations, you never had stability. You've never seen a parent get up and go to work in any sense, in any sort of steady, reliable way. And the psychological and emotional trauma of that is really deep and very real. And so that picture, it's a generational cycle that's reversing itself as you see the kids being inspired by their parents, just going above and beyond. So Coalfield Development today, we started very small at that one enterprise. We've now created over 300 jobs. We've trained over 1,200 people. We've helped start over 50 new businesses. So we're purposely in a diversified set of activities. If our problem is an undiversified economy, then to go all in on one strategy or one economic industry doesn't really make sense, because then we're just shifting from one mono economy to another mono economy. So it has to be a diversified approach, but we do try to stay organized. And the way we do that is through our 3 core capabilities. So we start social enterprises, and then we use those enterprises to put people back to work and to support them personally, professionally, and academically. So the politicians talk so much about jobs, and jobs are very, very, very important, obviously. But because of the deep poverty that we're seeing, there's so many extra human supports that are needed, so many barriers to well-being that folks are encountering. So the job for us is really just the beginning, and that creates an opportunity to then go deeper and earn trust and form relationships and help set a person on a path to not just get a job, but to really find a calling and to live a full life. And then we have a real estate component where we're taking historic buildings in small coal towns, revitalizing them, bringing them back to life. And these become the headquarters and the locations for the new businesses that we're starting. This, I can take questions. If you're interested in one aspect of our model or another, during the Q&A, we can go deeper on that. These are examples of some of the businesses we've started. Construction's our bread and butter. Construction, deconstruction. We do have a partnership with the local Carpenters Union. We're a pre-apprenticeship for the local Carpenters Union. We introduced new green technologies to the area and energy efficient technologies through construction. We helped start the first solar company in the southern part of West Virginia. That's what you see in the bottom right there. And we call this Solar Holler. If you know Appalachia, we have hills and hollers. And I love the tagline there, which is mine the sun. So shifting from mining coal to mine the sun. And Solar Holler has been a pleasant surprise. It now is a totally for-profit company. It's union jobs with the electrical workers, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, and more than 40 of them. And what we found is that West Virginians are proud to have powered the country. And I think there is an openness. If coal is not the industry of the future, and it's not realistically, we still want to have jobs we can be proud of. We still want to help power the country. We still want to contribute in meaningful ways. And so through renewable energy jobs, speak to that pride and speak to that culture and speak to our sense of agency. I think something sometimes that gets missed on the left, there's an assumption because people on the left support government programs for Appalachia, that why would we vote against our own interests when it's the Democrats who are getting us all this money? And of course, there's some logic to that, but people don't want to have to depend on government programs to survive. They will if they must, and they got to put food on the table, but they want to have jobs they can be proud of. They want to have agency. And I think that's an important part of the discussion that gets missed. Another important part of the discussion is, even when coal was booming, we still had some of the highest poverty rates, not just in the US, but in North America, really. And so it's this over-reliance, this mono economy, supposedly getting back to the good old days. Well, even back in the good old days, we did not have thriving economies. And so that's a part of the conversation that gets missed too. We also make furniture. Some of the wood out of the reclaimed buildings becomes upcycled into furniture products. And we helped start the first ever organic sustainable co-op, agriculture co-op in the community where we're headquartered. That's called Refresh Appalachia. So really a variety of businesses, all in new sustainable fields, designed to prove very tangibly what a newer and better and more sustainable economy can look like. Now, what ties them all together is this 33, 6, and 3 model. So whether it's in agriculture, construction, solar, whatever, we're hiring people who have been unemployed, on public assistance, facing barriers, many who are in recovery from substance use disorder. So we're purposely prioritizing and hiring people who need an opportunity, who've not gotten access to an opportunity like they should. And maybe they require a little extra patience, a little extra support. We're willing to be that patient, supportive employer in a way that maybe a purely for-profit employer cannot. But we are a real employer, so 33 hours of paid work on the job. That's the main thing. And that's what makes us different from a lot of other job training programs. There actually are quite a few job training workforce development programs in Appalachia that are federally funded. The problem is you could have the best job training program in the world, but what does it matter if there aren't enough good paying jobs to be trained for in the first place? So what we're doing through our social enterprises is both creating training opportunities, but also the actual employment opportunity. And we're doing that at the same time. 6 hours a week of higher education. So all of our crew members become community college students. 3 hours a week of personal development. So what I learned with that first crew was just the depth of the human challenges our people are trying to overcome, and so many of them at once. Health challenges, mental health, emotional health, physical health challenges, transportation barriers, childcare, trauma, stress, anxiety. It's financial issues, debt. It can become quickly overwhelming. So we realized we needed to intentionally carve out space every week to identify those barriers, make sure people know they're not alone, and overcome those barriers. 33, 6, and 3. That's how we organize each work week. For the 3, we have, it's a very structured process, actually. We have 12 professional development criteria, 12 personal development themes. And so we go deeper on one of those each month. So our vision statement is Appalachian places and people unlocking their full potential, power, and purpose. So again, it's so much more than just job training. It's so much more than just economic development. It's really human development, and it's community, creating a sense of community. And the way we define community is a place that cultivates opportunity for all of its people. So a major emphasis on diversity as well. So just some illustrations of, and then we'll move towards Q&A. This is actually a former mountaintop removal site. And this is what it looks like after the reclamation process. So if you've been to West Virginia, our typical ecosystem is lush, rich, thick forests. And this looks like prairie land out west. This is not natural. This is not normal. This is not healthy. It's very rocky soil. It's hard as a parking lot, and nothing more than a few invasive species can really grow. So our agriculture business uses a restorative agriculture process, regenerative agriculture process, to build the soil base back up to become a healthy part of the ecosystem again. So the goats come first. The goats clear away the invasive species. Then the pigs come. The pigs root and rut. Then the chickens come, and the chickens poke and peck. And all the while, these animals are pooping, and that's building the soil base back up again. We add some fertilizer. We use some equipment to rip it and dig it and scratch it. And after a period of about 2 years, you've actually got soil healthy enough to grow food in again. And then after a little bit of production, you can start to reforest parts of it as well. We have a partnership with the Nature Conservancy for reforestation. So very innovative approaches. Tourism is easily the fastest growing industry in the southern part of the state. It can be sustainable. It can also be extractive. So we need to be careful about how we do it. The jobs in tourism tend to pay about half what coal mining did. So we got to work on that. But it is a growing industry, and there are entrepreneurial opportunities. This is a crew of ours building a cabin in conjunction with a tourist site. These are some of our furniture products. Again, this is wood that would have ended up in a landfill. Very innovative and cool products. So these are jobs that build agency and build skill sets and that people can be really proud of. Appalachian people love We love to work with our hands. We're resilient, we're creative. And I think that's a strength. I think as we try to build a new economy in this world to be resilient in the face of climate change, the kinds of skills it's going to take to build that economy, I think Appalachia has in spades. The installation of the solar systems, the retrofitting of the buildings, the reclamation of the landmines, of the mine lands, the growing of a more local food system. So a lot of times when we talk about changing to a cleaner economy, coal country is sort of thought of like collateral damage. You know, the thinking sort of goes, well, we need to shift to cleaner energy. That's too bad for those poor coal communities. We'll help them out with some government subsidies, but it is what it is. Whereas really, I think Appalachia can be a leader in building the new economy. I think that's such a more empowering frame for the discussion. This is an example of one of our real estate projects, taking a building right downtown, the courthouse town, had sat empty for 10 years, was built in the 20s as a Model T dealership. And then it was a five and dime for many decades. So local people have fond memories of this building. It still has character, still has soul, but it had sat empty for a long time. We hire local people, we breathe new life into it. We introduce new technologies and energy efficient green technologies along the way. When we're finished, we put affordable housing upstairs, we put a new business downstairs. It's so tangible. And that's very important. We've had so many meetings and research projects and press conferences, and folks are tired of all that. They want to see change very tangibly. And that's a key part of our strategy. These are some particulars on just what is a social enterprise, what isn't. Again, if you're interested in the business aspect of social enterprise, we can dive deeper on that in the Q&A. And that's Coalfield Development. So happy to be here. I really enjoy Q&A, so happy to stay on through the rest of the time allotted and take any questions that you might have.
Brandon, thank you very much for that great presentation. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions. Before we go to Q&A, I want to put one thing in the chat. We always try to look for actions our members can take related to this. And there's a lot happening at the federal level and at other levels related to climate and related to the transition from our previous economy to the new cleaner economy. The Biden administration has been doing a tremendous amount about that. They have a new report on how coal mining and power plant communities can be economically revitalized and to move into the new economy. There's a lot that we're going to want to support in that. And this is something that's changing day by day. But to get you a start on that, I'm going to put a link in the chat about the report outlining the things that on the federal level we can do to help these communities begin a transition to a much more revitalized economy.
Yeah, and I will say, I think the American Jobs Plan, it's a historic opportunity for us. And I'm hopeful. If you look at the auto industry, when it was in decline between the Bush and Obama administrations, both Republicans, Democrats, more than 60 billion with a B dollars pumped into communities affected by that. During the tariff wars, the Trump administration put more than 30 billion into agriculture to help struggling farmers. And so we've seen federal programs here, but it's all been in the millions other than traditional road programs. And so the scale of the problem requires really very large investments just to give us a fighting chance. And I think this American Jobs Plan can do that. But please, if you're in touch with decision makers, just don't let them lose touch with the importance of the just transition lens and taking care of the communities that have really powered the economy for so long.
Okay, I guess we'll jump to the Q&A then. So the first question was, or is there a plan to install solar panels or windmills, I guess renewable energy in general, on reclamation sites, old coal mountaintop removal sites? Is that going on, or is it not necessarily just those particular spots?
There are big plans for that. It's not going on now, and the reason is policy. So I mentioned coal's power. Its economic power has declined significantly, but its political power and its cultural power and its psychological power is still very, very dominant. And so for utility scale solar project, which is what a mountaintop system would be, you have to have something called public purchasing agreements, PPAs. And our state just does not allow that. Our utilities do not allow that. And our state doesn't make the utilities, which is a state-backed monopoly, do PPAs. Now there's some movement on that. And the reason is there's really a free market argument to allow PPAs, that if you believe in competition, then let the various forms of energy compete to show who can create the most reliable and affordable and clean forms of energy. So there's some movement on that. The research is very clear that former mine sites would make really good solar farm locations. They tend to be high up, they tend to be clear, they tend to be flat, they tend to be actually near utilities, because since it used to be a coal mine, there are lots of power lines needed to be run nearby there at commercial grade scale, utility scale. So it makes a ton of sense. It's really a travesty we're not further along with that, but a lot of good groups are pushing really hard to try and make it happen.
Okay, so next question. Where does seed money for these projects come from?
Well, I'd be remiss if it partially comes from good-hearted people such as yourself. I mean, we some of the things that we do are never going to be purely profitable. And so we do depend on donations and grants for the human development aspects of what we do. Last year, we're fairly in the early days. It's heavily grant funded, and then the idea is over time the businesses get stronger and stronger to the point they can stand on their own. That's what happened with solar. Solar Holler is now a completely for-profit business, and but it took some subsidy in the early days to get it started and have some protection to get it sort of from the toddler phase of business into adulthood of business. The largest federal supporter of ours is the Appalachian Regional Commission. That's an invaluable federal resource that helps with a lot of really good work in Appalachia. We have tapped some Department of Labor programs before. We get very little money from our state government. The state's not necessarily actively against what we're doing, but they're not actively supportive of what we're doing either. And then there's some family foundations and individual donors that support us as well. So it's quite a hodgepodge. We also take out business loans, just like a normal business. We're something that makes us different from a lot of other nonprofits is we're not scared to borrow money when we have a good business plan and we're confident we can pay it back.
Okay, thanks. Another one of your listeners said this is a great success story. How big is your management team, and is your business model one that can be taken to other coal fields such as Wyoming? If so, do you know if that has begun?
I think that it can. We started in West Virginia. We've got groups in Ohio, Kentucky, Virginia, and Pennsylvania, pretty much all around, that are actively in the process of replicating that 33, 6, and 3 model, which is really cool to see. So I think even if Coalfield Development itself as an organization will always be based in the coalfields of Appalachia, I think, but that 33, 6, and 3 model, our approach to social entrepreneurship, I think that could be replicable. And I think it could be replicable out west. We're part of something called the Just Transition Fund, which is a national cohort of groups who are in coal communities trying to share best practices. And that includes groups from out west. It also includes groups from native reservations, which is incredible to hear their stories and be inspired by their amazing work. And so through that nationwide community, we're sharing a model there as well. Our management team, we're pretty nimble. There's about 9 sort of core leaders, and then there's another staff of like 10 to 12 at any given time with more specific coordinator roles. And then our crew members work in cohorts of 3 to 5 under the direction of a crew chief. And the crew chief's really key. They're in the field. they're a supervisor, but they're also a mentor. And they tend to be professionals who have experience in the different fields where they're supervising, whether that's agriculture, construction, solar, whatever. And so the crew chiefs, there's about 10 to 12 of those as well.
Terrific. Yeah, this is of interest to me too. Out in Arizona, a lot of our coal-fired plants are on or near indigenous Native American land. So it's nice to know that your successes are being sort of shared across the country, because I think there's a lot of this that needs to occur. So anyway, the next one, thanks for the interesting presentation and your important work. You mentioned that leaders have not found a new identity to replace the coal miner identity. Are you seeing any new identities emerging? How do you see the future in terms of shifting identities for West Virginians?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, a lot of high school football teams are the miners. You know, a lot of it runs deep. It runs deep. But I'm seeing more of an openness to a rebranding from younger people, which probably makes sense and is encouraging. And I think this there's a bit of an entrepreneurial movement afoot, and entrepreneurship sort of speaks to the independent streak in Appalachia. It speaks to the sort of the love of freedom and agency in Appalachia, and it speaks to creativity and resiliency. And so, you know, I'm born and raised here, and I've seen more new startups in the last 5 years than I saw, you know, the previous 25 years combined. So I think this entrepreneurial identity, this identity of resilience and creativity, with a little bit of quirkiness thrown in there, I think has a chance to take hold.
Okay. This one I think this will be tough, but I'll ask anyway. It says, do you think your model is capable of addressing all lost employment from curtailment of coal mining in West Virginia?
No, probably not. I don't think I'm proud of our work. I don't think we have a silver bullet here that solves the whole problem. I'm very proud of the 300 jobs we've created. And I'm also quite aware that it's just a drop in the bucket. So I think the aspect of our work that I'm proudest of is we're leading by example. We're casting a vision of very tangibly of what a new economy could look like. And I think there are a lot of spinoffs and ripple effects from that. But of course, one organization can't do it all. We can't start all the new businesses that are started. We can't employ all the people that need employed, but we can lead, and we can do our part to the best of our ability. And we can be creative, and we can take the risks and be the point of the spears and the pioneers to help grow and expand the new, more sustainable markets that we need. And when those markets take hold, and there's lots of different entrepreneurs innovating in those markets, then we know we're getting somewhere. And look, with solar, we helped start the first solar company around. It was sort of by accident. We got a call from a solar entrepreneur from another part of the state, said he wanted to do some job training in solar industry in the southern part of the state, knew we did construction. So we did it. We did a 2-week course, and the phone started ringing off the hook because people heard there was a solar business in town. And we were pleasantly surprised by that. And we just went with it. And we invested in it. We took the risk. We grew it. And now there's more than 10 solar companies in this part of the state. So just in the last 5 years, I mean, we went from no solar market to fairly robust and growing solar market. And so that gives me a lot of hope.
Okay. Another question. I guess I think you've got segments of things you're doing, but it says, are your business profitable? Do they need to be subsidized? And what is that level of profit or subsidies?
Yeah, some are and some aren't. And the goal at the start, it's not to be profitable from day one. It's to create opportunities who face barriers to employment. But over time, the businesses are expected to become profitable. Our solar is now actually the most profitable of the business. It's a $30 million company. Construction is our second biggest. It's about a $5 million a year company. And of the 50 that we've helped start. So I should clarify, we don't own and operate all 50. We also make investments in other startups. And so if we own more than 50% of a company, we own and operate it day to day. If we're less than 50%, we're mainly just providing technical assistance and job training and helping to network and market and line up more resources and investment. And about half of them have kept going and half of them haven't made it. And that's about normal. Startups are tough, even in a thriving metropolis. Startups in Southern West Virginia are really, really tough. So we know we're going to have some failures, and that's okay.
Okay. So yeah, we've got quite a few questions here. You've generated a lot. Let's see. The next one's, can you share some of the ways your employees' lives have been improved?
Well, that's the most rewarding aspect of the whole deal. I have countless stories that are nothing short of transformational, honestly. People who've gone from homelessness, from couch surfing, to becoming homeowners. I mentioned most of our graduates are the first in their family to ever earn a degree of higher education. The recovery community. Employment's a huge gap in the recovery process. Even once a person gets clean, is in active recovery, there's usually a record there. If there's not a formal record, there's a bad reputation, and these are small towns where word travels quick. And so we're a safe place where a person can get a chance again and get to show what they're capable of. And so to see people go from, fresh, just newly in recovery, to then becoming peer coaches to help other people in recovery, all just because we gave them a chance, and it's their accomplishment. It's not our accomplishment, but we gave them a chance. We gave them some extra support, and they did it. So individual success stories, honestly, just transformational. And it's little things too. We have a check-in each Wednesday where we celebrate progress. And, sometimes we start small. So last week we celebrated two young men and a young woman who finally got their driver's license back. It's such an injustice. Someone who struggled with substance use disorder, maybe had a record, dealing with $2,000 and $3,000 and $4,000 in fines. And they can't even, they're on the right track. They have a job, they're advancing their education, but they can't get a damn driver's license because they can't afford to pay these thousands of dollars in fines. It's totally crazy. And so we'll do a 0% interest loan. We can't just pay it off, but we'll help very, very patiently front the money. It does have to get paid back, but it's very, very patient, 0% interest. And support a person. And we were just celebrating folks that got their driver's license back. So there's little victories, there's transformational victories, but it proves that it is possible. And it's what keeps me going, honestly.
I love some of the specific examples you give. How about any of the people you bring into your programs having a shot, I guess, at owning their business or employee ownership?
Yep, we have seen that. Now, again, startups are tough anywhere. They're really tough in West Virginia. So these are pretty small. A lot of times it's like on the side businesses in conjunction with a full-time job. But in construction, there's a huge shortage in our country right now of skilled carpenters, plumbers, HVAC technicians, electricians. And a lot of our folks are having some luck in those areas.
Okay. Let's see. Next question. Do you have protections for your forests which sequester the carbon that needs to be pulled from the atmosphere?
Well, not near enough. We do have by East Coast standard. Now, if you're out west, it'd be piddly, but by East Coast standards, we have a lot of federal lands in West Virginia. And they have wilderness areas and lightly logged areas that sequester quite a bit of carbon. The problem is in the coal fields, it's just mountaintop removal has been unbelievably destructive. If you ever fly into Charleston or Huntington, West Virginia, it will bring you to tears to see every third or fourth mountain just that looks like a parking lot, and then the stream beds that are filled in. And so the Nature Conservancy has actually done worldwide science on this, and they've identified 3 main hotspots across the globe where protection of existing forests and reforestation to connect different habitats to have more connection between different forest areas, where it's most vital in order to sequester enough carbon to realistically deal with climate change. And Appalachia is in the top 3. So the ecosystems here are incredibly important to the entire rest of the planet. And I think there's job potential. I mean, if we get serious about an approach like that and create incentives from a policy level that incentivize sequestering carbon rather than blowing it up and sending it into the atmosphere, then that actually could create a lot of good jobs for people here in Appalachia. We haven't seen that at a large scale yet, but I'm hopeful that we can.
Okay, I think I want to be respectful of our time. I probably will not get to all questions that have been posted, but we'll still plug away for a few more minutes. This next one is, what type of support do you have from unions that depend on coal mining? And just more in general, I guess, given that you've been a coal state for so many decades, not just the unions, but government, are they starting to come to realize that they really do need to pivot? You've mentioned that you don't get a lot of support from the state, but that you really do need to pivot to other things. And, is there support for that? Do you feel like you're getting enough of that, or it's at least going in the right direction?
We're not getting enough of it, but it is going in the right direction. And this is a shift just in the last 2 years. So the thing is, the Trump administration really did try to save the coal industry. They rolled back every regulation they could. They pumped as much subsidy as they could find into the sector, and it didn't work. The decline in coal jobs has continued. So it really is market forces and global forces that's driving the decline of the coal industry as much or more than tighter government environmental regulations. And so, folks, it's more clear than ever now that if we are going to survive, we are going to have to adapt and change how we do economics here. And there's a greater acceptance of this than at any point in my lifetime here in West Virginia. So that's a real shift that I felt just in the last couple of years that's very, very important. People might not be happy about it, but it's sort of like the stages of grief, and we're getting to the acceptance stage and now slowly pivoting into the solutions phase. We're way behind the cue ball here. We should have been here 20 years ago. The writing was on the wall 20 years ago, but that is what it is. We get unions, so we get a lot of support from the Carpenters Union, from the Electric Workers Union. The Coal Union is sort of ambivalent. The coal union, having a coal union depends on having coal jobs in the first place to be organized and unionized at all. So the labor unions have not, coal unions, UNWA primarily, has not exactly been the most forward looking on these issues. But they're a good partner. I mean, they're willing to collaborate and learn and try out some new strategies, because now it's just more clear than ever that they're going to have to if their membership wants to stay and live and thrive here. A lot of people ask, why doesn't everybody just move? If it's so hard there, the economy's dying, why don't people just move? I would just recommend don't, that it's offensive because the answer is it's our community. It's where our roots are. I have a family cemetery in Braxton County on my dad's side. Goes back 7 generations. Many of us own, we're sort of a land poor situation. The one asset we have is our home and our land. And to be expected to move to a city where there's a housing affordability crisis right now and try and get a job that pays half of what coal paid, it's just not fair and it's not realistic.
Okay, thanks. at least one more question. Have there been any entries into wind turbine market? You have mentioned solar. The second part of this question is, I would think wind companies would be very interested in mountaintop locations. So there's that question, but then you said a lot of mountaintops have been reduced to non-mountaintops. And so maybe that's part of the answer.
Yeah, we've seen quite a bit of it actually, especially more in the central part of the state, whereas we're based down south. We've seen quite a bit in the sort of north central and eastern part of the state. So I think there is potential for wind, and we are starting to see that.
Okay, terrific. Let's see. I think we have a couple more minutes. There's a question about, well, what can elders do to help you?
Well, again, I don't want to come with a tin cup, but there are a lot of aspects of our work that are really hard and that are not profitable, will never be profitable. If you visit our website, there is a place to donate. Part of me hates to answer that, but on the other hand, it really is it's the fastest thing you can do for the biggest amount of impact. And I promise we would be good stewards of it if you do. The other thing I think pushing your Congress people for the American Jobs Plan and making sure that just transition is a big piece of that plan would be helpful. The third thing is, longer term, support our businesses. When Christmas comes around, we offer wood products, we offer home furnishings, we have an apparel line of business. Do business with us.
Okay, thanks. I think I'm gonna try one last question. And this has to just do with coal industry disinformation. Are there discussions about why the end of coal is necessary? Are folks in the community aware that activists are fighting for a just transition?
Not aware enough. I think, again, the power of the coal industry, marketing communications is another way that's played out. Billboards, bumper stickers, commercials, radio ads, everywhere you look, coal has driven a message for many decades. So the reality is, I think if you poll the general population, folks are very angry, and they feel like the coal industry is the one industry that's created decent paying jobs around here. So there's a lot of anger, a lot of frustration. And the just transition message, it's not like it's real. Honestly, unfortunately, it's not like it's taken hold and really caught on in the sort of broad way that we want it to. But it's taken hold more so. Again, this is 11 years, and we are by far making more progress in this 11th year than maybe in all the first 10 years combined. So on the one hand, we're not where we want to be. On the other hand, we're closer than we've ever been. So now's not the time to give up.
Okay, well, I think just in the interest of time, there were a few more. I'm sorry I didn't get to. I really do apologize for that. But again, I want to be respectful of our time. So I think I'll turn it back over to Frances.
Yep. Thank you, Brandon, for a wonderful presentation. And we learned a lot, and we look forward to continuing to work with you and continuing to work on a just transition. Another aspect of just transition is working with communities that have been heavily impacted by fossil fuels. And certainly there are many communities in West Virginia and Appalachia that fall into that, but there are also many more urban communities and particularly communities of color. So next month, our national call on June 22nd is going to feature Decoria Jackson of the NAACP talking about their climate and environmental justice initiatives, and we hope that you'll be able to join us for that.